Hi everyone, I'm Sandy, and today I am back with my 1001 book countdown, and this was a week of buddy reads. Actually, next week is also a week of buddy reads, but for today, we're just going to go ahead and get right to it. All right, so for the 1001 countdown, as usual, if you're not familiar with the topic, I will put a lovely card up here for you so you can go check out everything. But basically, it's book reviews based off of 1001 books you must read before you die list. And for today, we're just going to go ahead and put the numbers up, which are 978 and 23, which is my 2021 number. And we're going to go ahead and just jump right into the books. So it was a week of buddy reads, actually about a week and a half of buddy reads, because I started most of these at the end of July. And they carried through into last week. And so the first one is actually Pereira Declares by Antonio Tabucchi. This was a buddy read with Matthew from Bottle Imp Books. I will certainly leave his channel linked down below for you so you can go check him out. But this book, we ended up picking this up because of the Reading Europe 2021 challenge. My friend Sonia had put a picture of this book up asking if anyone had heard about this, and Matthew said he was interested in doing a reread, and of course I have to tag along because I love buddy reads. So we picked this one up and started it at the tail end of July. So Pereira Declares is based in 1938 fascist Portugal and follows the main character whose name is Pereira. And I apologize if I'm not saying that correctly, but following him as he works for a newspaper, writing in kind of the lifestyle section, and is just maneuvering his way through a pretty simple kind of life. He meets a character whose name is Rossi, and Rossi is trouble. You can tell Rossi's trouble. He hires him as an assistant who has to write fake obituaries or pre-obituaries for famous poets or famous people, and he fails at that time and time again, and Pereira actually pays him out of his own pocket because nothing that Rossi writes is actually publishable. So the fascism in this book starts very subtly, very subtly in the beginning. And as the book progresses, you start to see it really manifest. And it starts, again, very slow, and man, does it ramp up. It ramps up through things like suddenly all his calls have to go through the switchboard, and all of his articles have to be reviewed by his manager before he's able to do anything. And so it's really an interesting story about kind of that time and about fascism, essentially. One of the really interesting things too about this book, this is editing me by the way because I forgot to say this, is the use of the word declares. So as you go through the book and through the story, you start to get this feeling. It says Pereira declares, and the group, meaning especially Sonia, really it really gave an interrogation type of vibe to the entire story. And so you were never really sure like who the narrator was. You know it's not Pereira, and so you're just kind of going through the whole thing wondering, okay, what's going on with this? Is it something that they're recapturing now after the fact that he was being interrogated? That's kind of where your brain starts to go as you're listening to this constant use of the word declares throughout the story. And the ending of this book, it ends incredibly abruptly, and Pereira has to make some very difficult decisions about what he's going to do, and it does end in a bit of a cliffhanger because you don't actually know what happens to the main character at the end. My one issue with this book is there were some characters that were introduced that you don't get to hear the end of their story, and they weren't really in a cliffhanger either. They just weren't addressed. They just were talked about and then suddenly were just gone. And that was my one issue, I think, with this book. But it was an interesting one if you're interested in this time period, or if you've never read anything by Tabucchi, which isn't my first one. It's one I definitely would recommend. I thought it was interesting. I think I ended up giving it around the 3.5 stars mark or so. This is not my favorite, but I really did enjoy this book quite a bit. So, but with that, we go from 978 to 977, but it's not on my 2021 list, so that number stays at 23. All right, so for book 2, which is also a buddy read, I read The Midwich Cuckoos by John Wyndham. So this book was a buddy read with Justin from This Just In, and he and I had an absolute blast, or I had a blast. I think he had a blast. I hope he had a blast reading this together. This book, quite a bit different than, fascist Portugal. Now we're in the mythical town of Midwich. So Midwich has had something happen where they can't get a hold of Midwich anymore. The phone lines just are dead. No one is answering. And anytime anyone tries to get to town, once they cross over a barrier, they just fall asleep. So the book is told from an observer's perspective who happened to be lived in Midwich and happened to be out of town at the time that this event took place. What you find is that there was an object that went into town and that made everyone fall asleep for 24 hours. And at the end of the 24 hours, all of the women in Midwich who were there are now pregnant. And it's weird, this book. I know it's just one of those books that you kind of go, what in the world happened in that town? But there are some really funny moments at the start of this book. Them testing the boundaries of this event that happened was something that I thought was really funny, and how they used to try and do that. As the story progresses, it goes through the birth of the children, the aging of the children, up until I think they're about 9. And so it goes through all of that timeline with the children, but the story is never told from the woman's perspective or from the children's perspective. It's always told from an observer's perspective. And for me, that was a bit of a negative, because I really wanted to hear more about the women. They really did not talk about the pregnancies at all. They talked a tiny bit about the psychological impacts of someone ending up pregnant when they had no possibility previously of being pregnant, including a younger girl. So all of those different things. And as the children start to grow, you learn that there's something not quite right about the kids. And that part of the story is terrifying. And as it goes on, it gets worse and worse. And then the book, I thought this one ended abruptly. Oh my gosh. This one I had to read the same page about 4 times to fully understand what actually happened in this particular book at the end. And it was a big surprise what happened. And so they do talk a little bit about maybe what caused this event. And H.G. Wells is actually referenced in this book, which is an inference to War of the Worlds. But it was absolutely an interesting one. I don't remember what I rated it on Goodreads, but it was super fun, and I'm so glad Justin and I were able to read this one together. This is, by the way, another example of me just seeing someone reading a book and saying, oh, I want to read that, and inviting myself to read along with them. So but yeah, this one was really fun, and I really had a good time. But it is also book number 977, so I get to go to 976, and it is on my 2021 list, so I go from 23 to 22. Awesome. Getting there. And then for book 3, that's crazy that I have 3 books now. Granted, they're not, if you look at all 3 together, they're not like super thick books. So that's why I was able to get through 3 books this week. The next one was a buddy read with Steph at Steph's Bookish World, and that book is Miss Pettigrew Lives for a Day by Winifred Watson. And so this book, well, unfortunately, was a bit of a disappointment. I'm very sad to say that, especially since it was my first recommendation, or not first recommendation, but my first book that Steph picked up, because she doesn't read a lot of the same things I read, and it was a bit of a disappointment. One of the things with this is that I had thought it was a Cinderella retelling, which is what the front of the book says, or the beginning of the book says, and I did not get that from this book at all. I got an interesting character in Miss Pettigrew. So the story starts off with Miss Pettigrew going to a Miss LaFosse's house, and her life is just a whirlwind for that day, going through LaFosse's life and other characters, and meeting and going to kind of a ball. And so it's just all she's experiencing that is completely contrary to how she normally is in life. You learn more about her character as you go on through the day. You learn more about LaFosse. You learn more about the other characters as the day goes on, and how Pettigrew starts to try and help them through some things. And just by nature of almost being exactly opposite of who she is in normal life, helps these characters kind of get through some things in that day. But yeah, it was a little bit difficult from just the story perspective, because it tempted to move so fast, and there's so many people coming in and out of the house, there's so many people kind of going on, and you don't really know why Miss Pettigrew went there to begin with. You don't find that out until almost the very end of the story, and so it made it just not as much fun as I wanted it to be. I did still end up giving it 3 stars, which meant I did like it. I thought it was an interesting book, but it wasn't one that I would pick for someone who doesn't read a lot of classics. I would not have picked this one first for Steph. So for that, I feel a little bad. She was a trooper. She made it through the book. But yeah, it was not my favorite one. Unfortunately, it was not my favorite one, but Miss Pettigrew Lives for a Day. It was a delightful story. I would say if you're going to read this, don't read it with the idea that it's a Cinderella retelling, because I didn't get that part at all. But with that, I do go from 976 to 975. I think that's right. And 22 has to stay because it's not on my 2021 number. So in addition to that, for next week, if you thought these books were weird together, I have been reading Adam Bede with Britta Bowler, and as you can see, we are very far into this book, and am actually thoroughly enjoying this one so far, but this one will be hopefully for next week. And then yeah, I invited myself to another buddy read that wasn't on my August plans. Larry from Larry Has Opinions had done a 5-star prediction video, and this book was on it, and I said, hey, I have that if you're interested in a buddy read, and we just pivoted and made it happen, which is The Wasp Factory by Ian Banks. And we are, you know, really far into this book, and all I can say is this is a twisted book. Yeah, so The Wasp Factory is another one that I anticipate will be hopefully done. I don't think I can talk about Adam Bede and The Wasp Factory in a single video, though. I'm gonna have to look at that because those 2 books do not go together at all. But with that, as always, like, comment, and subscribe, and until next time, everyone, thanks, bye.